The sun hung low in the sky, casting an amber glow over Maplewood High School's track. It was a typical afternoon, where the sounds of sneakers pounding the pavement mingled with the sharp shouts of encouragement from teammates. This was a sacred space for many, a sanctuary where dreams of athletic glory were nurtured. Among them was Jamal, a young black athlete whose talent had begun to shine brighter than anyone had anticipated. But there was a storm brewing beneath the surface. Coach Thompson, the head coach of the track and field team, paced along the sidelines like a caged lion, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was a man of few words, and those words often cut like a knife. He had a reputation for being tough, but his discipline often crossed the line into humiliation, especially towards Jamal. The irony was thick. Here was a coach who had once been an athlete himself, yet the world had soured him, twisting his pride into prejudice. As Jamal prepared for another day of practice, he couldn't shake the feeling that Coach Thompson was watching him with a critical eye, looking for any chance to pounce. Jamal was more than just a gifted runner. He was the kind of kid who stayed late after school to practice, perfecting his stride and building his endurance. He had dreams bigger than the track, aspirations that soared as high as the Olympic podium. But his path was strewn with obstacles, both on and off the field. Coach Thompson had once been a celebrated sprinter, a local hero in his youth. Yet now, bitterness clouded his judgment, and his skewed view of the world made him dismissive of athletes he deemed unworthy. He often directed his ire towards Jamal, whose talent he begrudged. "Speed means nothing if you don't have the heart," Coach Thompson would often bark, staring Jamal down as if trying to strip him of his spirit. Jamal would nod silently, letting the words wash over him, but deep down, the hurt lingered. At home, Jamal found solace in his mother, Linda, a single parent who worked 2 jobs to support her son's dreams. She was his greatest advocate, instilling in him the values of hard work and resilience. Every evening after long hours at the diner, she would sit with him, listening to his stories and fueling his ambitions. "You're destined for greatness, Jamal," she would say, her eyes gleaming with pride. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." It was during a pivotal practice session that the boiling tensions finally erupted. The team gathered on the track, eager to demonstrate their progress. Jamal was particularly enthusiastic, eager to show the results of his relentless training. He could feel the energy buzzing around him, and as he lined up with his teammates, he was ready to race. But the moment he took off, Coach Thompson's harsh voice cut through the air. "Look at him, running like a wild animal," he sneered as Jamal flew past his teammates. "No discipline, no finesse. You think this is a game?" Jamal's heart sank. He had felt the stares of his teammates, the awkward silence that followed Coach Thompson's words. It was a familiar sting, the kind that came with being a black athlete in a world that often saw him as less than. "Keep your head up, Jamal," one teammate whispered, but Jamal was already lost in the chaos of his own thoughts. How could he prove himself when the man who was supposed to lead him forward was determined to hold him back? The practice continued, but the air was thick with tension. Coach Thompson continued to berate Jamal, each insult layered with venom. Jamal felt his confidence slipping, but he channeled that pain into his running, pushing himself harder than ever. With each lap, he focused on the finish line, imagining the thrill of crossing it first. The next few weeks were a blur of grueling practices and emotional turmoil. Jamal trained harder than he ever had, determined to turn the pain of Coach Thompson's words into fuel for his ambition. He ran early in the morning, sprinted on the weekends, and even joined local running clubs to improve his skills. His teammates began to notice the shift in Jamal. Instead of being defeated, he became a beacon of hope and determination. They rallied behind him, whispering words of encouragement during practice, even challenging the coach's harshness in subtle ways. One afternoon, while they rested between drills, one of his teammates, Michael, turned to Jamal. "You're faster than anyone here, man. Just wait until the championship. Thompson doesn't know what he's talking about." "Thanks, Mike," Jamal replied, forcing a smile. "I just need to keep my head down and keep running." But it wasn't just his teammates who noticed. News of Jamal's impressive times began to spread beyond the school walls. Local newspapers picked up on his achievements, and soon scouts began to take an interest. Jamal's dream of becoming an Olympic athlete seemed to inch closer with every practice. However, Coach Thompson remained skeptical. He continued to dismiss Jamal's achievements, often comparing him unfavorably to his previous star athletes. "You're not built for this," he'd say. "You think you can make it to the Olympics? You're just another wannabe." Each comment felt like a dagger to Jamal's heart, but he clung to his mother's words. He envisioned her standing at the finish line, cheering him on. The thought became his anchor, grounding him as he faced the coach's relentless negativity. The day of the regional track championship arrived, bright and clear. The atmosphere was electric with excitement as athletes from all over gathered to compete. Jamal stood at the starting line, his heart pounding in his chest. The roar of the crowd was deafening, but all he could hear were the echoes of Coach Thompson's voice. "Show them what you're made of, Jamal," he whispered to himself, envisioning his mother's smile, the pride in her eyes. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him as he took a deep breath, preparing for the race of his life. As the starting gun fired, Jamal surged forward, his feet flying over the track. The rhythm of his breathing matched the pounding of his heart, and with each stride, he felt a surge of power. He was running not just for himself, but for every time someone had doubted him. Midway through the race, he could feel his competitors gaining on him, but instead of faltering, he dug deeper. The finish line loomed ahead, and in that moment, Jamal remembered the many times he had pushed through pain, the countless mornings he had woken up early to train. He crossed the finish line first, breaking the school record. The crowd erupted into cheers, and his teammates surrounded him, lifting him into the air. Jamal was overwhelmed with emotion as he basked in the thrill of victory. But Coach Thompson's reaction was muted. He stood at the sidelines, arms crossed, a scowl etched onto his face. The dissonance between the celebration and the coach's disdain was palpable. Jamal looked over, expecting a nod of acknowledgement or even a reluctant praise, but all he saw was the man who had tried to tear him down. After the race, Jamal was approached by a former Olympic athlete who had come to watch. "Congratulations, young man. I heard a lot about you. You have real talent," he said, clapping Jamal on the back. As the former Olympian walked away, Jamal caught sight of Coach Thompson. "You think you can just come in here and take credit?" Thompson sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Jamal, fueled by the day's events, turned to face him. "I didn't take anything, Coach. I earned this. Maybe you should start believing in your athletes instead of tearing them down." The words hung in the air, a challenge that caught even the coach off guard. For the first time, he saw the strength in Jamal's eyes, the determination that had fueled his journey. News of Jamal's victory spread like wildfire. Local news stations wanted interviews, and college scouts lined up to see him in action. He was suddenly the star of Maplewood High, and the once doubtful whispers transformed into cheers of support. As the weeks went on, Jamal continued to train harder, preparing for the state championship. He surrounded himself with teammates who believed in him and distanced himself from the negativity that had once overshadowed his ambition. Meanwhile, Coach Thompson began to reflect on his behavior. The look of pride on Jamal's face, the respect he earned from his teammates, and the encouragement from the former Olympic athlete struck a chord deep within him. Perhaps his methods needed to change. Perhaps he needed to be more than just a coach who yelled. He approached Jamal one day after practice, a tentative expression on his face. "I've been hard on you," he admitted, his voice softer. "Maybe too hard. I see your potential now, Jamal. I want to help you reach it." Jamal was taken aback, his guard up, but he saw something in the coach's eyes, a flicker of respect that had been absent before. "Thank you, Coach," he said cautiously. "I appreciate it." As the state championship approached, Jamal stood on the starting line, his heart filled with hope. The challenges he had faced had only made him stronger. He glanced around at the crowd, at his teammates who had rallied behind him, and at his mother, Linda, standing proudly in the stands, her face beaming with encouragement. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. The sounds of laughter, cheers, and the rhythmic clapping of supportive fans created a symphony of encouragement that resonated deep within him. Jamal took a deep breath, feeling the familiar weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. The starter raised the gun, and Jamal's pulse quickened. He remembered every hour spent training, every moment of doubt he had pushed through, and every time he had been underestimated. This race was more than just a competition. It was a culmination of all his struggles, his dreams, and his determination. The gun went off, and he launched into the race, his legs moving as if they had a mind of their own. He felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins as he raced ahead, every stride echoing the lessons he had learned along the way. The cheers of the crowd faded into the background. All that mattered was the rhythm of his breath and the sound of his feet hitting the track. As he approached the final stretch, the finish line came into view, but he was not alone. Two competitors flanked him, and the finish line loomed ahead like a beacon of hope. Jamal could feel their presence, the pressure building, but instead of faltering, he pushed himself harder. He remembered Coach Thompson's words from the past few weeks, the encouragement, the support, and it spurred him on. "Run, Jamal, you've got this." He heard Linda's voice, clear and unwavering, cutting through the noise. With every ounce of strength he had left, he surged forward, pouring everything he had into those final moments. He crossed the finish line, and the world around him exploded in cheers. For a heartbeat, he stood there, breathless and in disbelief, before the realization of victory washed over him like a wave. He had done it. He had become the state champion. Jamal turned to find his teammates rushing towards him, enveloping him in a sea of congratulations. Laughter and shouts filled the air, and for a moment, all the hardships, the doubts, and the criticisms melted away into pure joy. Coach Thompson approached, a rare smile breaking through his usually stern demeanor. "You've shown incredible heart out there, Jamal. I'm proud of you. I see now that you're not just an athlete. You're a champion." Jamal's chest swelled with pride, but it was not just the trophy in his hand that mattered. It was the recognition, the respect, and the understanding that he had earned through hard work. He looked at Coach Thompson and nodded, the animosity that had once existed between them fading into a newfound camaraderie. "Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it," Jamal replied, his voice steady. As the celebration continued, Jamal spotted his mother in the stands, tears glistening in her eyes. He ran over, enveloping her in a warm embrace. "We did it, Mom. I did it," he exclaimed, the joy bubbling over. "You did it, baby. I always knew you could," she cried, pulling back to look him in the eye. "This is just the beginning. The Olympics are waiting for you." In the weeks that followed, Jamal's life transformed. He received invitations to prestigious running camps, and scouts from top colleges expressed interest in his talent. Each step of the journey brought him closer to his Olympic dreams, and he was determined to seize every opportunity. Coach Thompson became an ally, changing his coaching style to better support his athletes. He focused on building their strengths and cultivating their talents, using Jamal as an example of what true dedication could achieve. The dynamic between them shifted, and Jamal found himself motivated not just by his own dreams, but by a desire to lift others as well. The Maplewood track team became a force to be reckoned with, and Jamal often took on a mentorship role for younger athletes. He shared his story with them, emphasizing the importance of perseverance, hard work, and the need to rise above adversity. One afternoon, during a practice session, Jamal gathered the team. "Listen up, everyone," he called, capturing their attention. "I want you all to know that no matter what anyone says, you have the power to define your future. Don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do." The words resonated, igniting a spark in the hearts of his teammates. They ran with renewed determination, each stride echoing Jamal's passion. Years later, as Jamal stood at the Olympic trials, ready to take the next step toward his ultimate dream, he reflected on how far he had come. The memories of Coach Thompson's harsh words had faded, replaced by the strength he had gained through overcoming them. As he lined up at the starting blocks, he closed his eyes, envisioning the journey that had led him here, the struggles, the triumphs, and the support of those who believed in him. He opened his eyes, focused on the track ahead, and took a deep breath. The starter's gun fired and he launched forward, propelled by the dreams of his past and the promise of his future. The race was on, and Jamal was ready to claim his place among the champions. The sun was just beginning to rise over Maplewood, casting a warm glow over the quaint town. It was a Saturday morning, and the streets were slowly coming to life as locals opened their shops and families prepared for the weekend. In the heart of the town stood a small auto repair shop, Marcus's garage, known for its skilled mechanics and fair prices. It was a place where cars got fixed and friendships were forged. Inside the garage, Marcus Johnson, a talented black mechanic with over a decade of experience, wiped his hands on a rag and surveyed the cluttered workspace. His shop was filled with the familiar sounds of tools clanking and engines humming, accompanied by the scent of motor oil and freshly cut grass from the nearby park. Marcus loved his job and took great pride in his work. He was respected not just for his mechanical skills, but also for his integrity and the trust he built within the community. However, today would be different. Today, the harmony of his work environment would be shattered by an unexpected accusation that would turn his life upside down. Marcus had always been the kind of person who could fix just about anything. His passion for cars began at an early age when he would spend weekends with his grandfather, a master mechanic who taught him the ins and outs of auto repair. Marcus carried those lessons with him, and as he grew, so did his reputation as a dependable mechanic. On the other side of the equation stood Mr. Johnson, a well-to-do white man in his 50s, known in the community for his arrogant demeanor. He was a businessman who owned several local franchises, and his entitlement often rubbed people the wrong way. Mr. Johnson had little patience for those he deemed beneath him, which often included service workers and anyone outside his social circle. This particular Saturday, Mr. Johnson arrived at Marcus's garage in a brand new luxury SUV, a vehicle he flaunted as a symbol of his success. He pulled up, adjusting his expensive sunglasses, and stepped out with an air of superiority. Little did Marcus know, Mr. Johnson's visit would unleash a storm of drama that would test his character and resolve. After a brief greeting, Mr. Johnson handed Marcus the keys to his SUV. "I need a full inspection, Marcus," he said, his voice dripping with authority. "And make sure you take care of it. I don't want anything messed up." Marcus nodded, keeping his cool. "Of course, Mr. Johnson. I'll make sure everything is in top shape." Hours later, after completing the inspection, Marcus called Mr. Johnson to inform him that the SUV was ready for pickup. But when Mr. Johnson arrived, he wore a scowl that immediately raised Marcus's concern. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked, noticing the tension in the air. "That's what I'd like to know," Mr. Johnson snapped, pointing at his vehicle. "What did you do to my car? It was perfect when I brought it in, and now it's damaged." Marcus was taken aback. "Damaged? I just inspected it. Are you sure it wasn't like this before?" "Don't give me that. You think you can just play around with my car and get away with it? You better fix this." Mr. Johnson's voice rose, drawing the attention of other customers in the garage. Marcus felt his stomach drop. This was completely out of character for him. He prided himself on his honesty and workmanship. "Let's take a look at it together," he suggested, trying to keep the situation calm. As they approached the vehicle, Marcus noticed a scratch on the rear bumper that Mr. Johnson had apparently not mentioned before. "This wasn't here when you brought it in," Marcus pointed out. "I didn't even work on the back of the car." "I don't care. You're responsible for this," Mr. Johnson continued, his face reddening with anger. "I'll be reporting this to the owner. I expect to be compensated." Feeling the weight of the accusation, Marcus's heart raced. He could sense the other customers watching, their eyes flickering between him and Mr. Johnson, trying to gauge the unfolding drama. The humiliation hung heavy in the air. "Let's get this sorted out, sir. I'll pull the footage from our security cameras," Marcus offered, desperate to prove his innocence. Mr. Johnson scoffed. "You think a video will save you? It's clear you can't be trusted." The tension escalated as Marcus nodded, determination fueling him. "I'll get the footage, and we'll clear this up," he insisted. He rushed to the back office, heart pounding, knowing that proving himself right was not just about his reputation, but also about standing against the prejudice he had faced his entire life. In the dim light of his office, Marcus pulled up the security footage from earlier that day. The video displayed his shop from various angles, providing a view of every car that entered and exited. As he scrubbed through the footage, he found the moment Mr. Johnson arrived. Watching closely, Marcus felt a mix of anxiety and hope. He needed this evidence. He couldn't let this false accusation ruin him. Then, there it was, a clear view of Mr. Johnson driving in, parking carelessly, and then getting out of his vehicle. As Marcus continued to watch, his heart sank. The footage revealed Mr. Johnson knocking into a trash can while backing out, a loud thud echoing through the audio feed. After that, Mr. Johnson's SUV was parked for a while before he came back in, completely unaware of the small scratch that had already been present. The realization hit Marcus like a freight train. Mr. Johnson had damaged his own vehicle and was trying to blame Marcus to cover his tracks. He felt a mix of anger and relief. Anger at the injustice and relief that he had proof to defend himself. Armed with the video evidence, Marcus gathered his courage and returned to the front of the shop, where Mr. Johnson was still pacing angrily. The sight of him stirred Marcus's determination. "Mr. Johnson, I have the footage," Marcus declared, his voice steady. "I think you should take a look." As Marcus played the video for Mr. Johnson, the tension in the air thickened. The customers who had gathered leaned in, intrigued by the unfolding drama. Marcus's heart raced as he pressed play. The footage showed Mr. Johnson arriving, parking his vehicle, and, crucially, the moment he struck the trash can while backing out. Gasps echoed from the small crowd as they watched the evidence unfold. Marcus felt a wave of validation wash over him, the truth finally coming to light. Once the video concluded, the silence was palpable. Mr. Johnson's face turned from red to pale, disbelief etched across his features. This isn't possible," he stammered, trying to gather his composure. "You're trying to frame me." The crowd erupted in murmurs, disbelief turning to anger directed toward Mr. Johnson. "You can't just blame someone else for your mistake," one bystander shouted. Another chimed in, "You should be ashamed of yourself." "Is this how you treat a hard-working man?" someone else added, their voice filled with indignation. Marcus stood tall, fueled by the support of the community. "This is about respect. I work hard for my reputation, and I will not let anyone destroy that with baseless accusations." Seeing the tide of support shift, Mr. Johnson's bravado faltered. He was used to being the one in control, the one calling the shots. But today, the tables had turned. The voices of the community rang louder than his own. Faced with the evidence and the crowd's judgment, Mr. Johnson's demeanor changed. The arrogance he had exuded moments ago melted away, replaced by a desperate need to salvage his reputation. Okay, I was wrong," he muttered, his voice barely audible, "but I'll fix this." "Fix it?" Marcus replied, his voice firm. "You can start by apologizing to me and everyone here for your behavior." Mr. Johnson took a deep breath, looking around at the faces that had once regarded him with respect. "I apologize, Marcus. I let my anger get the better of me. I should have handled this differently." The community members exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and amusement. It was rare to see Mr. Johnson humbled, and the sight brought a sense of justice that lingered in the air. With a nod, Marcus accepted the apology. "Let's move forward from this, but I hope you learn from this experience. We're all in this community together, and we need to lift each other up, not tear each other down." As Mr. Johnson left the garage, his pride bruised, but perhaps a little wiser, Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had stood up for himself, and the community had rallied behind him. The incident had revealed not only Mr. Johnson's shortcomings, but also the strength of the support that surrounded Marcus. Over the next few weeks, business at Marcus's garage boomed. Loyal customers flooded in, eager to support the mechanic who had stood up against unfair treatment. Word spread about what had happened, and the small-town mechanic became a local hero, a symbol of resilience and integrity. One afternoon, as Marcus worked on a vintage Mustang, he noticed a familiar face at the door. It was one of the community members who had supported him during the confrontation. "Hey, Marcus, we're organizing a community event to celebrate local businesses and show our support for you. We want you to be the guest of honor." Marcus looked up, surprised but pleased. "You really don't have to do that," he replied, wiping his hands on a rag and stepping out from behind the car. "I'm just doing my job." "But that's exactly why we want to celebrate you," the community member insisted. "You stood up for what's right, and that inspires us all. It's about time someone showed that integrity matters in this town." As the weeks rolled on, the preparations for the event continued. Marcus found himself humbled by the outpouring of support. Local businesses donated food, drinks, and prizes for a raffle, and word spread quickly. turning what began as a small gathering into a town-wide celebration. Finally, the day of the event arrived. The town square was transformed into a lively gathering space, complete with tents, tables, and colorful decorations. Families filled the area, children played games, and the smell of delicious food wafted through the air. A local band set up on a makeshift stage, ready to play throughout the day. As Marcus arrived, he was met with cheers and applause. The townsfolk had put up a banner that read, "Celebrating integrity and community. Thank you, Marcus." The sight brought a lump to his throat. He felt overwhelmed, realizing that the incident with Mr. Johnson had not only highlighted the importance of standing up against prejudice, but also strengthened the bonds within the community. "Marcus, come on up," the organizer called out, waving him toward the stage. "We want to give you a little something." As he stepped up, a hush fell over the crowd. The organizer began to speak. "Today, we celebrate a man who stood firm in the face of injustice. Marcus, your commitment to your work and the way you handled that situation with Mr. Johnson has inspired us all. We want to show our appreciation for not just your skills as a mechanic, but your integrity as a person." The crowd erupted in applause as the organizer handed Marcus a framed certificate that read, "Maplewood's Integrity Award." Marcus felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He knew that this award was not just a personal achievement, but a recognition of the values he believed in. "Thank you all so much," Marcus said, his voice shaky with emotion. "I didn't expect any of this. I just do my job the best I can. But to see all of you here supporting me means the world. We're all part of this community, and together we can lift each other up. Thank you." The cheers that followed echoed through the square, a testament to the strength of the community spirit. As the day wore on, the celebrations continued with food, laughter, and games. Families mingled and friendships blossomed. Marcus took the opportunity to chat with customers and friends, sharing stories and laughter. He felt a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. Mr. Johnson, who had initially been too proud to show his face at the event, was spotted later in the afternoon. He stood awkwardly on the edge of the crowd, watching the festivities. Taking a deep breath, he approached Marcus, who was surrounded by well-wishers. "Hey, Marcus," he said, his tone subdued. "I just wanted to apologize again for everything. I was wrong, and I appreciate how you handled it. I know I've been hard on you and others in the past, and I'm trying to change that." Marcus studied him for a moment. "I appreciate that, Mr. Johnson. It takes a lot to admit when you're wrong. I hope this experience helps you see things differently." Mr. Johnson nodded, a look of genuine contrition on his face. "I've realized that everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are. I want to support local businesses, starting with yours." They shook hands, a gesture that signified a newfound understanding. The crowd around them noticed the interaction and murmured their approval, embracing the idea of forgiveness and growth. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the town, Marcus stood back and took in the scene. Children ran around with ice cream, couples danced to the music, and laughter filled the air. He felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. In that moment, he realized that the ordeal with Mr. Johnson had been more than just a battle for his reputation. It had been a catalyst for change. It had opened dialogues about respect, integrity, and community support. It had shown him the power of standing up against prejudice and how one person's actions could inspire many. Later that evening, as the band played their final song and the crowd began to disperse, Marcus packed up his things with a sense of hope. He knew that the road ahead would not be without challenges, but he felt ready to face them head-on, armed with the support of his community. As he drove home, he reflected on how far he had come. He thought about his grandfather, who had instilled in him the importance of hard work and integrity. He hoped he was making him proud. Marcus parked his car in front of his modest home and looked around, taking in the tranquility of the evening. With a smile on his face, he thought about the future, his shop, his community, and the bonds he had strengthened. He was more than just a mechanic. He was a pillar of the community, and he was determined to continue making a positive impact, one car at a time. As he walked inside, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey he had undertaken and the lessons learned. He was ready to embrace whatever came next, confident that he was never alone in this fight for justice and respect. Together with his community, he would forge a path forward, strong and united. Jasmine had always loved the smell of coffee. The rich aroma of freshly ground beans and the soft hum of chatter around the cafe always felt like a small slice of peace amidst the chaos of life. For as long as she could remember, she had been drawn to the warmth and comfort of coffee shops. So when she started working at Bean and Bliss, the upscale coffee shop in the heart of downtown, she knew it was a perfect fit for her, at least for now. What no one knew was that this job, this role as a barista, was far from the limit of Jasmine's life. "Grande caramel macchiato, extra shot, no foam," she called out with a smile, setting the steaming cup on the counter. "Thank you, Jasmine." A regular customer smiled back as he grabbed his drink. Everyone liked Jasmine. She was quick, efficient, always kind, and most importantly, she knew how to handle the sometimes overwhelming crowds that filtered in and out of the cafe during peak hours. Today, however, felt different. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, and she had a feeling it wasn't just the rain clouds gathering outside. Then the door swung open, and in walked Mark. Mark was trouble, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit with the air of someone who believed he was better than anyone else in the room. He was one of those customers that every barista dreaded, impatient, condescending, and always ready to make a scene. Jasmine had dealt with him before, but today he seemed particularly agitated. The moment he stepped inside, the mood in the cafe seemed to shift. He strutted up to the counter, his eyes scanning the menu as if it were beneath him. Jasmine braced herself. She could feel his annoyance before he even spoke. "You, again," Mark muttered under his breath, loud enough for Jasmine to hear. "Do they not have anyone more competent working here?" Jasmine smiled politely, even as her heart sank. "Good afternoon, Mark. What can I get started for you today?" Mark rolled his eyes. "Get me a venti mocha latte, extra hot, 3 shots of espresso, no whip, and make it fast." "This time. Last time you were so slow I thought I'd die of old age." Jasmine nodded, refusing to let his words get under her skin. "Of course. 1 venti mocha latte coming right up." As she turned to prepare the drink, she could feel his eyes on her, scrutinizing her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake. The other customers in the cafe noticed too, their glances filled with discomfort. But no one said a word. "Unbelievable," Mark muttered again. "Can't find good help anywhere these days. And look at this place, it's full of idiots." Jasmine's fingers twitched as she tightened her grip on the espresso machine's handle. She wasn't new to this kind of treatment. In fact, she had encountered it far too often. People who assumed she was just a nobody, a lowly barista they could talk down to because of her race, her gender, or simply because they thought she wasn't worthy of respect. But Jasmine had learned long ago to rise above it. What they didn't know about her would be their undoing. She quickly finished the drink and handed it to Mark with a smile. "Here you go. Venti mocha latte, just how you like it." Mark grabbed the cup without so much as a thank you, sneering at her. "I'll be amazed if you didn't mess this up. Probably too busy thinking about your nails or whatever it is girls like you worry about." Jasmine's smile faltered for a split second, but she recovered, standing tall. "I hope you enjoy your drink," she said evenly, refusing to rise to his bait. Just as Mark was about to walk away, he took a sip of his latte and froze. His eyes narrowed, and he stormed back to the counter. "What the hell is this?" he barked. "Did you hear a word I said? I asked for extra hot. This is barely warm." Jasmine frowned slightly. "I'm sorry about that. Let me remake it for you." "Don't bother," Mark snapped. "You wouldn't know how to do your job even if someone spelled it out for you. People like you should stick to what you're good at, whatever that is." The cafe had gone silent. Customers stared at Mark, then glanced at Jasmine, clearly uncomfortable with the way he was treating her. Jasmine could feel the heat of their stares, but she kept her head high. She wasn't going to let him get to her. As Jasmine was about to apologize again, her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. It was a quick message from her father, reminding her about a meeting later that day. She quickly replied, assuring him she'd be there. In her rush, she didn't realize Mark was still watching her closely. "Who do you think you are, texting on the job?" Mark sneered. "Maybe that's why you can't even make a cup of coffee right. Too busy playing on your phone. This is exactly what's wrong with people today." Jasmine took a slow breath, the tension building inside her. This time, she didn't smile. I'm very sorry, sir, but I'll have to ask you to calm down. I've remade your drink, and if you have further complaints, I'll gladly get the manager. Mark scoffed, his face turning red with frustration. Manager? I don't need to talk to some underqualified, overpaid manager. You people are all the same, lazy, useless, and good for nothing but standing behind a counter. Jasmine stood still, her heart racing. She wanted to respond, wanted to tell him that his assumptions about her were not just wrong, but insulting. But she had promised herself she wouldn't lose her cool, no matter how demeaning the situation became. Still, her resolve was being tested. At that moment, the cafe's manager, Lisa, stepped out from the back. She had overheard the commotion and could tell something was wrong. Lisa was a short, blonde woman with a no-nonsense attitude, and she wasn't about to let anyone bully her staff. Is there a problem here? Lisa asked, stepping up beside Jasmine. Mark turned to her, his face twisted in annoyance. Yeah, there's a problem. Your employee can't seem to make a decent cup of coffee and has the nerve to act like I'm the one being unreasonable. Lisa raised an eyebrow, glancing at Jasmine, who gave her a small nod. I see, she said carefully. Well, I apologize if the service wasn't up to your standards, but I would ask that you treat our staff with respect. Respect? Mark let out a bitter laugh. You want me to respect someone who can't even do their job? You must be joking. Lisa's expression hardened. Jasmine is one of our best baristas, and I won't tolerate anyone speaking to her, or any of our staff, that way. For a moment, it seemed like Mark might back down, but then, in a fit of frustration, he threw the barely touched coffee into the trash and glared at Jasmine. You won't last long in this world, sweetheart. People like you never do. Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time, Mark caught a glimpse of the message flashing on her screen. It was a reminder from her father about the meeting later at Caldwell Enterprises, one of the largest corporations in the city. Mark's eyes flickered with recognition. Caldwell Enterprises, he asked, his tone suddenly curious. Why would someone like you be texting with them? Jasmine hesitated, realizing he had seen the message. She could tell from his expression that his interest had been piqued, but she wasn't ready to reveal the truth just yet. I'm meeting with someone later, she said vaguely, hoping that would satisfy his curiosity. But of course, it didn't. Mark's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, his demeanor shifting from anger to suspicion. Meeting with someone? A barista like you? At Caldwell Enterprises? Don't make me laugh. Jasmine didn't respond, simply turning away to help the next customer, but Mark wasn't done. You must know someone there, huh? Maybe a friend in low places. No way someone like you has any real connections. Lisa stepped forward, about to escort Mark out of the cafe, when the door opened once more, and a tall man in a sharp, expensive suit walked in. He scanned the room before his eyes landed on Jasmine, and a warm smile spread across his face. Jasmine, he called out, his voice loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. Mark turned around, confusion washing over his face as the man approached Jasmine and gave her a hug. I hope I'm not interrupting your shift too much. We've got that meeting at 3 p.m., remember? Jasmine smiled, visibly relieved to see him. Of course, I'll be there. The entire cafe was silent as the man turned to Lisa and nodded politely before addressing Jasmine again. Your father mentioned that today's meeting is important. Caldwell Enterprises is looking forward to your input. Mark's jaw dropped. What? He stammered, completely caught off guard. Her father? The man smiled, not noticing Mark's confusion. Yes, her father. He's eager to hear your thoughts on the expansion plans for Caldwell Enterprises, Jasmine. You've always had an eye for strategy. Jasmine nodded, maintaining her composed demeanor despite the growing tension in the room. The moment of revelation was approaching, and the shift in Mark's expression made it clear that he was beginning to realize just how wrong he had been. Lisa, the cafe manager, looked at Jasmine with a mix of pride and surprise, though she'd known bits of Jasmine's story. The other customers had fallen completely silent, some casting glances at Mark, eager to see how this would unfold. Mark swallowed hard, his arrogance evaporating as reality set in. Jasmine Caldwell. The young black barista he had belittled was the daughter of the CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, one of the wealthiest and most powerful businessmen in the city. Not only that, but she was apparently heavily involved in the family business, far more than anyone, especially Mark, could have guessed. Jasmine's colleague stepped forward to take over the counter, allowing her to step aside and speak to the man in the suit, her father's trusted associate. They talked in hushed tones about logistics and schedules for the upcoming meeting, but as they spoke, Jasmine could feel Mark's stunned gaze still lingering on her. She turned back to him, her eyes meeting his. "You," Mark stammered, his usual confidence completely shattered. "You're Caldwell's daughter? The Caldwell?" Jasmine gave a slight nod. "Yes, but that doesn't change anything about what just happened." Mark's face turned pale as he realized the weight of his actions. He had insulted, belittled, and harassed the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the city, and now there was no way to take it back. The smug entitlement he had walked in with had been wiped clean, replaced by an awkward, panicked energy. I didn't know," Mark stammered, desperately trying to salvage the situation. "If I had known, I would never have—" Jasmine held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "Exactly. If you had known who I was, you would have treated me with respect. But here's the thing, Mark. I'm not asking for respect because of my father's status or my involvement in the company. Respect shouldn't be conditional on someone's title or wealth. It's something everyone deserves, whether they're a CEO, a janitor, or a barista." Mark opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. His face flushed with embarrassment as the weight of Jasmine's words sank in. The entire cafe was watching now, and the silence was thick with anticipation. Mark's usual smugness had been replaced by an air of desperation, and for the first time since he had walked into the cafe, he was the one who felt small. Jasmine continued, her voice calm but firm. "People like you think you can treat others poorly because you assume they're beneath you. You didn't even see me as a person. But you know what? It doesn't matter what job I have, where I come from, or who my father is. What matters is how you treat people, period." Mark's eyes darted around the room looking for a way out. I'm sorry," he finally blurted out. "I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to." Jasmine nodded. "I understand, but let's be clear. Your apology doesn't mean much if it's only coming because you found out who I am. If you truly regret how you acted, maybe you should think about how you treat people every day, not just the ones you think can benefit you." Mark's face was now a deep shade of red. He looked down at the floor, utterly defeated. There was nothing left for him to say, no more excuses to make. Lisa, the manager, stepped forward. "Mark, I think it's time for you to leave," she said firmly. "We won't tolerate this kind of behavior here." Without another word, Mark turned and hurried out of the cafe, his head hung low. The door swung shut behind him, and the tension that had gripped the cafe finally began to ease. A few moments passed in silence before the regular customers slowly began whispering to one another, some casting impressed glances at Jasmine, while others muttered about how Mark had gotten exactly what he deserved. Jasmine, for her part, remained poised, though the weight of the moment was not lost on her. The man in the suit, her father's associate, smiled at her. "I'll see you at the meeting," he said softly. "Your father will be proud to hear how you handled yourself today." Jasmine gave a small nod. "Thanks," she said, her voice soft but steady. As the man exited the cafe, Jasmine turned back to Lisa, who gave her a proud smile. "You did good, Jasmine. Real good." Jasmine smiled back. "Thanks, Lisa. I just wanted to make sure he understood." "He definitely did," Lisa said, nodding. "I think you taught him a lesson he won't forget anytime soon." Jasmine looked around the cafe, where the atmosphere had returned to its usual lively hum. The customers were back to their conversations, and the staff had resumed their work. For a moment, Jasmine just stood there, taking it all in. She had always known that people like Mark existed, people who would look down on her because of the color of her skin, her job, or just because they thought they were better than everyone else. But today, she had stood up not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been treated the way Mark had treated her. In the end, It wasn't about her secret identity or her father's status. It was about something much bigger, about reminding people that dignity and respect are not privileges to be earned, but rights that belong to everyone. As Jasmine tied her apron back on and returned to the counter, a warmth settled over her. She might be the daughter of a CEO, but today she was proud to be just Jasmine, the barista who demanded respect, not because of her connections, but because she, like everyone else, deserved it. And that was more than enough.